Welcome to this joint overview and scrutiny committee meeting. I'm Councillor Keith Wellham and I will be chairing the meeting today. May I first remind you of some domestic arrangements. Please ensure that you maintain social distancing from all other persons whilst in the chamber and in the communal areas. Please ensure that you are wearing a face covering at all times unless you are sitting down or if you are exempt from doing so. And please use the hand sanitizer and wipes provided. Please ensure that microphones are turned off when not in use. Please do not interrupt other speakers or hold separate conversations whilst others are speaking. If you are attending the meeting to speak and persistently interrupt the meeting, you may be asked to leave. Please ensure that your mobile phones are on silent or switched off. We will be using e-voting for this meeting on the modern.gov app, so please could members make sure they are logged in, those who can, and are ready to use the app. I'd like to remind everyone present that this meeting will be broadcast live to the internet and will be capable of repeated viewing. The whole of the meeting will be recorded except where there are confidential or exempt items. If you make a representation to the meeting, you will be deemed by the Council to have consented to being recorded. By entering this meeting as a speaker, you are also consenting to being recorded by the Council and to the possible use of those sound recordings for webcasting and or training purposes. The Council, members of the public and the press may record, film, photograph or broadcast this meeting when the public and the press are not lawfully excluded. If you hear the alarm, please leave the building immediately via a fire exit and then make your way to the assembly point, which is the Ipswich Town Football Ground. Follow the signs directing you to the fire exits at each end of the floor. Do not enter the atrium, the ground floor area and walkways. If you are in the atrium at the time of the alarm, follow the signs to the nearest fire exit. Use the stairs, not the lifts. Do not re-enter the building until told it is safe to do so. Can we have a readout of the people who are attending? We've obviously got members of the committee and we have various officers who are either here or will be appearing.
Thank you, Chair. So this morning we have the officers of Samantha Lake, who is the Corporate Manager for Customer Operations, Vicky Mosley, Corporate Manager for Communities, Peter Watson, Community Safety Project Manager, Ian Rafferty, Community Safety Officer, Justin King, Housing Needs Standards Manager, and we have the Cabinet members here this morning of Councillor Susie Morley, Councillor Jan Osborne and Councillor Alistair McCraw. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. So can I move to the agenda, please? We have some apologies for absence and a substitution, I believe.
Thank you, Chair. This morning we have apologies from Councillor Mary McLaren with Councillor Sue Ayres subbing, and apologies from Councillor Catherine Grandin, and apologies from Councillor Jane Gould, and also Councillor Carston as well.
Yes, James Carston's had to leave. Thank you. Are there any declarations of pecuniary and non-pecuniary interest by members? Councillor Maybury. No, you can't press the button.
Nothing happens. Yes, there is a comment further into the papers this morning which mentions citizens' advice. I declare that I am a director of Sudbury District Citizens' Advice. Thank you.
Councillor Muller.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I should declare that I'm a trustee of the Mid-Suffolk Citizens' Advice. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Can we now confirm the minutes of the meeting of the Joint Overview and Scrutiny Committee held on the 19th of July 2021? Are there any points recording the accuracy of the minutes, please? Councillor Barrett.
Although I wasn't there, reading it, it doesn't make sense. There's on point 88.1, It says the chair referred to the question that had been received by Thomas Morelli. Well, that should say from Thomas Morelli, otherwise it doesn't seem to make sense.
Thank you. Yeah, we can amend that. With that change, do I have a proposer that I can now sign the minutes? Councillor Muller, thank you. And a seconder, please. Thank you, Councillor Scarf. Thank you. We'll change that and they'll sign the minutes later on. We need the electronic vote on whether or not I should sign those minutes. So this is for accuracy, having made that change. And could the governance officer please conduct the electronic vote?
Thank you, Chair. I will just put in that one amendment as well. Right, thank you, Chair. The vote is now in progress for members. If you go to the modern.gov app and go to the plus sign in the top right-hand corner, then it will show the subsection on attendance/voting, and on there, if you click on the light blue coloured one, it shows the vote in progress. Councillor Margaret Maybury, could I please take your vote verbally, please?
I shall abstain. I wasn't at the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Dawson, are you able to? 4. Thank you very much, Councillor. Thank you, Chair. So all votes have now been received, and that is 8 votes for and 1 abstention. So
Thank you.
Carried.
Yes, thank you very much. Have we received any petitions in accordance with the Council's petition scheme, please?
None received, Chair.
Thank you. Move on to item 5. Are there any questions from the public?
None received, Chair.
Thank you. Item 6. Any questions from councillors?
None received, Chair.
Thank you very much. We're now to the main item of the meeting, which is item 7, which is the annual review of the Joint Homes and Housing Strategy and Homeless and Rough Sleeping Reduction Strategy. In a minute, I'll ask Justin King to present the report. I'll then invite questions on the presentation and the report, then questions on the delivery plan and the progress report, and then we'll debate the item. So we'll get all of the facts sorted before we debate. But first, I'd like to call on Councillor Jan Osborne to give her introduction as Cabinet Member. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning. I am delighted to introduce to you for consideration and scrutiny today the annual review of the Joint Homes and Housing Strategy and the Homelessness Reduction and Rough Sleeping Strategy 2019 to 2024. In March 2019, members of all political parties unanimously approved the adoption of the first Joint Homes and Housing Strategy and Joint Homelessness Reduction and Rough Sleeping Strategy. These strategies commit us to be open and transparent, providing information on how we are performing against the strategic aims set out within the documents. So as part of adoption, a commitment was made to report back to Overview and Scrutiny Committee for an annual review and update to members. This is the second annual review of the progress made against these strategies. Today, I ask that the members review the contents of this report and appendices, along with verbal contributions. Scrutiny will be pleased to note that there are no red flags in the action plan, and this is really good considering the challenges that the housing team have had to face over the last 18 months. Justin King, our Housing Needs and Standards Manager, who is the leader and coordinator for the Strategic Housing, Choice-Based Lettings and Private Sector teams, is with us today and will now provide you with a presentation which shows the progress to date, the actions currently underway, and the future action planned over the remaining 2.5 years of the strategy. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Osborne. Over to you, Justin, for your presentation when it's up on the screen and when your microphone is on.
Yes, thank you, Chair.
So we're ready when you are. Thank you.
Good morning, councillors, and thank you for the opportunity to present to you today some of the highlights of the work undertaken, in progress and planned to deliver against these strategies. It was hoped to have Francine Tarn here today to deliver the presentation, as she has been instrumental in working with colleagues to drive forward progress. She sends her apologies. So this annual review follows on from the report that you received in September 2020. Despite the COVID-19 pandemic and the need to reprioritise some of the services within housing, our officers have continued to work hard to deliver against these strategies. Between 2020 and 2021, significant progress has been achieved with the Housing Delivery Action Plan that you can find at Appendix 3 of the report. With well over 100 actions, I think you can have confidence on the vast volume of work that has taken place to deliver actions to meet the aims within the strategies. Regular quarterly monitoring takes place and contact with each of the action leads to maintain that momentum. This table on the slide highlights some of the progress that has been made over the last 12 months. So the Homes and Housing Strategy does contain a vast area of work, including across multiple departments within the council. So some of the specifics today I will try to answer, some I may need to take away for a detailed answer from colleagues. The table on the previous slide is summarised in this graph, with the solid blue line showing the progress that we have made in 2021, and I'm pleased to say actions experiencing delays has decreased to 0. So we know that the Homes and Housing Strategy is made up of 9 strategic aims. Over the next few slides, I'm just going to highlight some of the things that we have delivered, are in progress, and are still planned or underway to continue delivery against those aims. For aim 1, I think the highlights has to be the delivery of new affordable housing units, and in particular perhaps the delivery of the former Angel Court care home into 21 high quality social houses. Within our planning service, the pre-application service, we have been undertaking work to survey our customers and understand their requirements and take forward actions to improve that pre-application service. More recently, we've seen an increase in the number of pre-applications, 187 in quarter 2 compared to 149 in the previous quarter. Aim 2. In the delivery of good quality housing, we've been undertaking some work to review our garage stock, and we've identified 15 sites for future potential development. We've also been working with community-led and community land trusts to be able to support them for the delivery of affordable housing. With our existing stock, we're continuing to input data into our housing stock database, and we're 50% of the way through that process. In the coming months, we will be doing some more work around our Section 106 agreements to try and get some consistency, particularly around the local people and the local connection. With Aim 3, this has a direct link to our joint homelessness reduction and rough sleeping strategy. As part of our goal to continue to access funding streams for additional support to tackle rough sleeping, we have been awarded approximately £430,000 worth of funding. And this will be some of this money will be utilised to build 5 properties for rough sleepers with high needs. Ongoing, we continue to inspect our temporary accommodation 3 times per week. Aim 4. With the delivery of our landlord services, we continue and have started work with the Tenant Participation Advisory Service, and they've assisted us in carrying out a review so that we are ready for the changes that will be coming in the social housing white paper. We've undertaken some work to find new methods of communication, including a new monthly email bulletin, which is now reaching nearly 4,000 tenants. With our current stock, we're also working with the Energy Savings Trust to accurately predict the environmental performance of our properties, so we can ascertain which homes we need to carry out thermal improvements to. Over the coming months, we are also working on our housing revenue account business plan and making sure that we are ready for the next 30 years with that business plan. Aim 5. Our community infrastructure levy has been successfully spent with work on 4 school extensions, 3 health facilities, and land for a 5th school extension. This is all linked to the work that's contained within our infrastructure delivery plan and our funding statement plans as well. In progress is some work around our car parks, and particularly the installation of solar carports at Station Road, Sudbury, and Gainsborough Road in Stowmarket. Aim 6. One of the definite and massive highlights, I think, over the last year has been the commencement of our independent living service and the delivery of our disabled facilities grants. This service has been brought in-house, and we are now successfully spending the allocated disabled facilities grants money that we receive. In addition, we've been able to bring 2 long-term empty homes back into use and distribute 23 landlord grants to improve the heating systems in properties in the private rented sector. We're currently bidding for some money to carry out some enforcement on the private rented sector landlords who may be letting properties with an EPC rating of F and G. If that's successful, that will initiate some additional resources to tackle those properties that are thermally inefficient. Through our Suffolk Central lettings, we have our landlord forum, and we continue to strengthen our links with the private rented sector. Aim 7. There's been a review of our housing allocations policy, and changes have been approved. We continue to have a project group to look at our short stay permanent sites for gypsies, Romani and travellers to meet their identified needs. Various delivery plans across all of the teams are in place to ensure delivery of other strategies. The Suffolk Housing Board has recently appointed a new coordinator, and that new coordinator can take forward some specific areas of work, including that of understanding housing needs of our older and vulnerable people. Aim 8. We've completed our active wellbeing programme in Glemsford, Eye and Holbrook, and great work is taking place around the Dementia Action Alliances in other towns and villages. We continue to install heat pumps across our council-owned housing stock, and these are replacing some of the older, inefficient electric storage heating systems. Aim 9, 5 neighbourhood plans have been adopted, and 11 neighbourhood plans have been adopted, and a further 15 communities are preparing for their amended plans as well. And we continue to have regular discussions with Homes England about the funding and sourcing of funding to support the provision of affordable housing by our registered providers. Sorry, that was slide Aim 9. So on this slide, this is to explain how our housing strategy links to the council's corporate plan. Housing is one of our key strategic priorities in the council's corporate plan. So our strategic aims and action plan seek to support and complement the other strategies within the corporate plan, particularly the wellbeing and communities strategy. So in September 2021, the strategies will reach the midpoint of its proposed 5-year lifespan. The COVID-19 pandemic has contributed to emerging policy considerations with more focus on health and well-being. After a series of workshops that have been conducted recently, housing issues have been identified, and therefore we believe that these strategies will benefit in the future from promoting actions to tackle identified issues, such as greater investment in sustainable homes, more emphasis on habitats and biodiversity, consideration to the social housing white paper and planned changes, and the development of our HRA business plan. I hope from this report and presentation, members are assured that we are delivering and adapting the housing delivery plan to meet new requirements, new and current challenges, and deliver against those aims. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Justin. Yeah, there's a lot going on. Yes, with 9 strategic aims and about 100 action points, I can see there is a lot of work to do. So I'm going to invite, I've got Councillor Muller first, I'm inviting people to ask questions on the report and the presentation. So, Councillor Muller, please.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, Justin, thank you very much for that excellent presentation. That was really interesting. Just a couple of questions, actually. You mentioned about the garages and that there are going to be some redevelopment proposed for those. For those tenants that currently hire those garages, are there other plans for those tenants to be able to park their vehicles elsewhere being proposed? Or?
If any scheme that has a garage that is occupied and planned redevelopment takes place, there will definitely be full consultation with anybody occupying a garage and alternative solutions worked and considered for that particular customer, definitely.
Thank you. And my second question, if I may, Chair, is that you mentioned about some 5 properties for rough sleepers, which I think is really excellent. That's the right way to go. Will these be similar to those, I think it's proposed by Ipswich Borough Council, where they've converted shipping containers to house rough sleepers? Is that a similar thing that you are thinking about? Or?
I believe these are going to be new modular units,
right,
but they are not shipping containers that have been used by other local authorities. There are a variety of options out there available to be used for new temporary accommodation. The exact modular home that we are proposing, I don't know, but I can take away to find out for you.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Ayres is next.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Excellent report, Justin. Firstly, how you set up the lease so quickly in Sudbury. I think the time span where that was sorted was amazing. So that was good. You didn't mention, but I think that should be highlighted. Recently, how you've homed someone. And again, that was brilliant. And also about the Gypsy Traveller Liaison, because I chair the subgroup. Maybe we could get together with your officers. So I think maybe, as I wanted to, and we wanted to from the group, from the Gypsy and Traveller group, to maybe have some sort of training for other councillors to understand the difficulties and problems with gypsies and travellers, because quite often it's not in my field sort of thing. But so I'd like to help with that if we could. So that was very good. And the other thing is the officer who frequently walks the meadows at Sudbury and round there looking for the homeless people. There's so many people at ground level that do so much work, so thank you.
Thank you. And in response to the Gypsy and Romany travellers, then we can definitely take that forward through that working party and develop a training as required.
Thank you. Councillor Carter, I have next.
Yes, thank you. Again, excellent report. Might as well follow suit and everyone else saying that. In the report in the papers, mentions here regarding how the on the annual basis 3-year pipeline of the new council development acquisitions with the section 106 spending. With Babergh, they have purchased trying to read my own notes without my glasses. Always helps, doesn't it? Yes, sorry. Mid-Suffolk, 43 section 106 acquisitions, which is 71 less than Babergh. I'm trying to work out, is this due to a difference in priorities between Mid-Suffolk and Babergh, or is it a difference in availability that we've had between the two? Why have Mid-Suffolk spent less than Babergh in this?
I think the supply of new affordable housing is not an exact science that you can probably put numbers in each year. What may be more helpful within the report for us to include in the future is an average number over a 2 to 5 year period, because that will probably give better representation of the numbers.
Thank you. I also had a question regarding on page 39 regards the internet supply for our tenants. Would that be including? Would that include offering advice for suppliers, or would it be a incentive to select suppliers to actually might be able to, if we approach suppliers and see whether or not they'd be willing to offer a deal to our tenancy, we might be able to offer better internet connection to our tenants.
Yes, so it's on page 39.
Yes, page 39, the June-July regarding internet usage for our tenancy.
Sorry, is that, have you got the number of the action? Oh, number 4.8.
4.8, yes.
Sorry, yes, I'm with you now. Could I take that question away and come back to you and consult with the action lead for that particular action to find out specifically?
Thank you.
Thank you.
And a final question regarding the rough sleeping. Will we be working with partners? Should the rough sleeper have any accessibility issues? Will these modular units be fully wheelchair accessible? And if the rough sleeper happens to require more medical supplies that they currently may have, how will it be reaching out to our partner organisations, or will it be left to until they find further housing needs before they can have any help with the adaptations or equipment?
There's different levels of accessibility through the planning process for access. I don't know specifically what level is planned for these new units. What I can definitely confirm is that we would work with any individual user to meet any accessibility needs to make sure that they had adequate housing that met their needs.
Brilliant. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Osborne, I think you had a question or a point to make, please.
Just to rewind back to the question about the acquisitions of homes for our housing stock, it can vary from month to month. So you might find that Babergh has an increase, Mid-Suffolk's goes down, and then the following month, Mid-Suffolk's will go up. I think also you need to bear in mind that actually Mid-Suffolk's HRA, Housing Revenue Account, isn't as healthy as Babergh's, so we can possibly spend a bit more on acquisitions than perhaps Mid-Suffolk can at this particular point in time.
Yeah, I've got one or two questions on the sort of the supply of affordable homes, if I may. Do we know how many for each district we need of social rent, affordable rent, and shared ownership? I mean, are we on the target? And do we have sufficient housing units to ensure that there'll be no homelessness or rough sleeping? And also, sorry, I'm going on a bit. And also to reduce the amount of time that families or individuals spend in bed and breakfast.
Can I answer?
Please do, yeah.
In terms of the affordable housing supply, yes, we do have numbers, and I think that's contained within documents within the joint local plan for each council. How many units for temporary accommodation? Predicting the supply is very, very difficult. I think looking back over the last 12 months, how we've responded to everyone in the need to be able to house temporarily everybody, to source accommodation when we have peak demand. We're very flexible and adaptable to how we use our accommodation to meet those needs. So I think we'll always keep that under review to make sure that we can meet that future demand.
If I could just come back, and perhaps you can answer this point as well, and that is that the draft joint local plan was published before the COVID pandemic, and I think in terms of housing, a lot has changed in housing, and the need for social rent or affordable rent. Is there any proposal to review the number of affordable units and rented units as a result of the pandemic, comparing it to the number in the joint local plan? Councillor Osborne.
If I can just rewind back to your first question. The one way that we monitor need is obviously by the housing register and the number that's on there and the type of properties that they need. So that's one mechanism for doing that. In regards to will we ever be able to house everybody in, we'd love to have a magic wand, but I think that's going to be an impossible task moving forward. But we will do our utmost to ensure that people that haven't got a home is absolutely limited, and that includes rough sleepers and those that are sofa surfing as well. I think in regards to temporary housing, that's an ongoing thing on week to week. That's constantly being reviewed by officers on the need, because there's no way that we want to provide temporary housing if we find in 6 months' time we're going to have those standing empty when there's people that need permanent accommodation. So that's constantly being reviewed on the need for temporary accommodation. So I hope that answers some of your questions.
Yeah, thank you. Do I have any? Councillor Scarf.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yes, congratulations on steady progress that you're making as a team on these action points. But just a general point, there are one or two in the action points within the programme here where they have dates which have actually passed, but the narrative tells a different story. So I would appreciate if some of the things you're still to scope in terms of whether you're going to actually do them or not, and they require further information. But I wonder if we could have, as an outcome from today, a reassessment of the dates within the report to ensure that they accurately reflect achievable timescales. Because when reviewing anything as a committee, it's very difficult, obviously, if the date's already passed, but you can see in the narrative that work is ongoing. So perhaps some of them need ongoing within them rather than date specifics, and some of them may well need date specifics in order to ensure that they're done in a timely fashion and, you know, concentrate priorities on.
I think if I could just explain, I think the delivery plan is as at June or July of this year, and then through the committee process is the presentation today. As you say, some of those dates are now out of date and there could be an update. There certainly will be another annual review take place for September next year. Would it be helpful to have an interim update, I guess, is what you're asking for, is it?
On some of the specifics, perhaps, yes, where they fall into that category where I've just sort of elaborated, because the narrative does tell a different story, and one or two of the action points are dependent on other outcomes that the council is doing. I do have a specific other question, Chair, as well, if I may.
Please, yes, please carry on.
Item 3.13 talks about us building a relationship with local citizens' advice to agree a protocol for joined-up working to support individuals and families experiencing complex housing difficulties. And the narrative tells us that work is currently being planned and a meeting is planned with colleagues from Citizens' Advice to determine the next steps for this action. As a local member in Stowmarket, I had quite a lot of contact with Citizens' Advice, and I am aware that there are actually issues with that in terms of the Housing Solutions team and its interaction with Citizens' Advice, and I'm concerned, I think, that that level of interaction has deteriorated over recent times, and we really need to take some action to ensure that we get that back again, because Citizens' Advice are often the first port of call for tenants with problems with housing, and provide a wonderful service in terms of helping those tenants, and they are perhaps diverted to Citizens' Advice in the first case rather than Housing Solutions. So there is, I think, a desperate need there for a better working relationship, because I am aware that the working relationship is not where it should be at this moment in time.
That's useful feedback, and I agree with you. Our relationship with the Citizens' Advice Bureau is vitally important, so we will certainly take that away and make sure that we do follow up with Stowmarket Citizens' Advice Bureau, and we reprioritise that action to make sure that our work with all of the Citizens' Advice Bureaus is progressing as we would expect it to.
Thank you.
Yeah, if I can support that, it is vital, because quite often Citizens' Advice will be dealing with other difficulties of a particular family. It's not, you know, housing may be the first, that family's first concern, but quite often, if housing and Citizens' Advice are working together with a particular individual or family, other things will come to light. There will be other problems, and a sort of a holistic solution is probably what's best, and the only way to do that really is working very closely together. I think that, I would support exactly what Councillor Scarf has said. Sorry, Councillor Osborne.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I can't speak for the relationship between Mid Suffolk and Stowmarket, but the one at Sudbury, and I'll just say I'm a trustee on the COB, has got a really good working relationship, and speaking to the manager of the Sudbury branch, she is very happy with the relationship that we've got. However, there is always room for improvement. So I would suggest that perhaps we could look at the model that we've got in Sudbury, compare it to the one in Stowmarket to see if there's some good points that we pick up on, and we may even be able to pick up some points from Stowmarket to put into practice for the Sudbury one. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. Councillor Ekping-Yong, we've got you next, and then Councillor Dawson.
Thank you, Chair. I have a couple of questions. I mean, I do agree with other councillors that this is an extensive and useful report. But I am actually, from a management point of view, rather concerned by the large number of actions and the management of them, because I noticed that actually of the 92 actions, 38 of them are ongoing. And when I review some of those actions, it seems to me that they are actually part and parcel of the work of the department. And I'm not sure entirely how useful they are to be documented in the way that they are being documented here. You know, I think, you know, I'd like to see a shorter, or more concise set of actions, really, in relation to the work that the department is doing, which, and I would agree with Councillor Scarf about the timeliness of those actions. And in fact, there are some actions that clearly I would think would be completed well before the end dates that are being suggested due to the nature of those actions. So I would urge a comprehensive review of this list in the very near future, because I think that there are elements of it that leave a lot to be desired. I'd like to go to item 1.8 of the actions, which is related to affordable housing. And I'm just wondering why we're not able to quantify the potential number of affordable housing units based on the planning applications that have been approved that would qualify to be putting forward affordable housing, and therefore I then understand what we need to be doing to chivvy up the developers to deliver on those. That's my first question in that section. Then I think in a sense related is item 1.14, which relates to self and custom build. And I believe, you know, you're looking at some garage locations to do that, but I'm just wondering whether when you talk about self-build, are these for people to build and live in their own homes, or what would the conditions be attached to that issue? And then finally, in 1.10, you're looking to keep evidence on stalled sites and update those on an ongoing basis. I guess, quite frankly, we ought to know how many stalled sites we've got and you know what the situation may or may not be with regard to all of those. So if you could address that, I'd really appreciate it.
Thank you, Councillor. I think you're right in terms of the actions that we've got identified as ongoing, that 2 or 3 years ago they've now moved on and they have become business as usual within the delivery of specific teams. So perhaps we need to now find a new way of showing those as business as usual work and effectively completed actions for the future. In terms of the 1.8 and the timing of properties being delivered, any potential development site can take 2, 3, sometimes longer years to see it actually come out of the ground and be delivered, which makes it very hard, I think, to predict with preciseness the timings of supply. In 1.14, I know we do maintain a self-build register, which I think that action refers to. With regards stalled sites, could I take that question away to liaise with the action lead and come back to you, please?
Thank you. Councillor Ekping-Yong.
If I could just come back on Mr. King's response with regard to the affordable element. I mean, it's my understanding that the sites that qualify would have a number of affordable homes attached to them. So I think that's my point. What is that figure? And then, you know, what is the timeline for their delivery?
Again, I think that's something I need to take away and explore with the action lead as to the feasibility of being able to predict and plan in that way. I wouldn't like to say if it's possible or not. Thank you.
Yeah, that's almost in parallel with the stalled sites, because some of the affordable units are held up with delays, either a stalled site or a slow development of the site. So, yeah, I think that's probably something for planning officers to have a look at and to come back to us with. Thank you. Who have I got next? Councillor Dawson.
So thank you very much for your, that's excellent, your talk. It's very informative, and I must say, you know, Hadley, we're absolutely delighted with what you've done there. It's taken 7 years, I think, but it's fantastic, really is fantastic development. But what I'd just like to ask, one of the things I'm wondering is why on 2.1 the reviews for such an important portfolio are going to be, instead of biannually, going to be annually. And I find that a bit disturbing because, you know, the assets are such a big part of our portfolio, and I would rather, I think it's very important this this takes place biannually. And furthermore, as a councillor, you know, this isn't communicated to us in any way at all. So I have to be honest, my second question I was coming on to is, you know, I have no idea actually how many, it didn't really come out to me in this, how large our portfolio is. And you've got several people buying these houses, so we're set, I mean, I know that we've got 21 houses in Hadley, but how many in Babergh, and I'm sure likewise in mid-Suffolk, have they sold? So I can't sort of get my head round really whether we've got an excess or a deficit of the housing supply. And it seems to me the most important thing, I've asked this a number of times before, I think it's something that I can't understand why we don't have a monthly update on the housing portfolio. And someone mentioned to me by accident when I was at Hadley that apparently there might be another 50 houses coming up in housing stock at September. And she said she'd get back to me and never did. So I'm sure a number of the members, like myself, really, we need a running tally on this. What's being sold? What is being actually built? Because 21 here or there, that's great for us, but actually that's 7 years it's taken us to get there. And I've got no idea with this paper what the deficit or surplus is and how many of those are actually going to people, rough sleepers, because I understood that we had no rough sleepers, particularly in Hadley. So this housing portfolio is just a general, isn't it?
So can I just clarify, you mentioned 2.1, is that in the action delivery plan?
No, in your...
or is it the actual main report?
In the main report here, the purpose of the report, options to be considered, and one of them is to have an annual review rather than twice yearly. I'm surprised twice yearly isn't enough, actually.
So to just respond to the various points, firstly, in terms of Hadley and the delivery of Angel Court, I don't want to take any credit for that because I've only joined Babergh Mid-Suffolk in the last 6 months. So I will pass that on to colleagues that have worked extensively hard over the last few years for the delivery of that scheme. So thank you. In terms of 2.1, that relates to an annual review of this homes and housing strategy, where it's been recommended and decided that an annual review of the strategy.
But why? Sorry.
I would imagine that's the recommendation, was it from a previous committee for an annual review? I think when I look back at last year's report, it was suggested for an annual review of the homes and housing strategy. Is that?
Yeah, I mean, my recommendation would be, it just seems very peculiar. It's not more often.
I think that Overview and Scrutiny last year decided they would like to review the whole of the strategy or progress on meeting the strategy 12 months ago. So that is the reason that it's here today. I think what you may be suggesting, Councillor Dawson, is that there are some aspects of the strategy which need to be reviewed more often.
Well, I certainly do, yes. I mean, you know, with these sort of strategic reviews of large portfolios, they're sort of done weekly, monthly, but I'm surprised it's twice yearly. But it's just something that I would be thinking, if this was my portfolio, I would really want to be on the ball with this, and I'd want to be communicating it to my fellow councillors. And if there's only an annual review, and certainly people like myself, I don't really know what's going on with this portfolio.
Can we park that for a little while until we come on to the sort of main thrust of the debate and moving towards recommendations?
This is an option to be considered, it says here, and I think we should consider that, you know, to recommend it remains at a minimum twice yearly, if you don't mind. Is that all right?
That would be fine.
Yes.
Let's bring that back when we're looking at recommendations.
Yeah.
We don't. These are just suggested recommendations. They're not the recommendations that we're necessarily going to put to Cabinet and to Council.
No, I realise that.
Thank you. Did you have anything else, Councillor Barrett?
Dawson. Sorry,
Dawson,
yes,
sorry.
It was about
I've got
the
Councillor
numbers,
Barrett
actually.
next, sorry.
Yeah, so it's about the numbers of the, you know, the surplus and deficit. Really, I think you alluded this to yourself, Councillor Whelan and Councillor Eppignor. The capacity, is it increasing or is it decreasing of the overall capacity there? Have we got a surplus or we've got a deficit? I just don't know, and I don't really know how many there are in the portfolio, to be exact.
Right. Can I take Councillor Morley, please? If you're going to attempt to answer some of these questions, some of these points.
I might be able to assist a little bit, in as much as the acquisition of housing units for the HRA comes under the assets and investments portfolio. And whilst I'm not the assets and investment portfolio holder, I do have a little bit of knowledge about this, and I can tell you that there's 214, a target of 214 to be added to Babergh, and a total of 200 new council homes being added for mid-Suffolk. So perhaps I could suggest that you invite the Assets and Investment Assistant Director, perhaps to your next meeting, who may be able to give you more details on that.
Yeah, I can confirm those numbers are in the action plan, but we don't have a clue as to how far we've got along the track of that. And if it is in the housing strategy, it's that the housing strategy has actions for offices around other departments. We've got various action leads within the document. I think what we would have liked to have seen probably was some progress on all of the actions, no matter who the action lead is. But I'll go to Councillor Osborne now.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. There's a couple of things on this one. First of all, in regards to the market homes, I can't answer that, it's not in my portfolio, but those that come forward on our developments for affordable homes, there's a waiting list for them. The ones at Angel Court, for example, went in less than a week. So there's definitely a need there, and more are definitely required. In regards to the reporting, as you've already alluded to, Mr. Chairman, this recommendation came from a scrutiny meeting, so that's why that's been put forward as annually. As the portfolio, I have monthly meetings, and this is always part of that monthly meeting. There's a report to me, and we go through the actions where there's a delay, where there's progress, etc., etc. So that is done on a regular basis. If there's going to be an impact in a particular ward, I ask that ward member be advised, and I get the CC of those emails, so I see that those ward members are advised. For example, the ward members in Hadley were kept up to date on the progress of Angel Court, and were indeed invited to the handover of the keys that we had. In regards to the progress of deliverable homes, affordable homes, that's done every quarter in the monitoring report, and that goes to all members, not just Cabinet members, that goes to all members. But if there's members feel that could be reported in a different way, a more effective way, all they need to do is let myself know and my housing team, and we'll look to see if we can report it differently. In regards to Babergh, there was 214, as Sue's already alluded to. We're already on target to deliver more than that. We've already delivered 130 of that. And only in September there was 21 Angel Court, 24 Waldenfield Road, 8 in Shockley, and Romans Way. I haven't got the number for that, but Acton are coming forward as well. So there's a lot coming forward, but that is in the monitoring report every quarter. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, thank you. Did you have any other questions, Councillor Dawson?
Yes, so if I could just come back on the homelessness reduction. I mean, does this mean then that we've got so many coming forward, we haven't sold very many, and therefore we've got a surplus? I'm still not, it's not clear, is it? This is, I don't know if I'm being a bit stupid here.
Is this on social, are you talking about social housing units owned by the
this is
district?
a housing strategy and about homelessness reduction. And if we've got 240 being added, now I'm sure many of these our housing stock, as in mid-Suffolk, are being sold. So do we have a surplus of housing, therefore we can house a lot of these people who don't have homelessness, or have we got a deficit, in which case some of our action points will need to be perhaps changed? I don't know, because the numbers aren't here.
I think the indication that we've received is that there are more people asking for an affordable home than there are homes. So, and I think even if the number of affordable homes available increase, so the number of people wanting them would increase. So it's not as if it's a target that's fixed in time and is going to be met at that date, because the target will forever be going up. But I mean, you're right. We need to have that data, or members need to have that data. I think the indication is from the Cabinet member that that data is available quarterly, and perhaps is available, Councillor Osborne, to you more often than quarterly. I don't know, but if there is other data required, or if there's other data available, let's see if the need is met by the data that is available. But I think that's something we can look at outside to make sure that we have got the information we need. Councillor Osborne, you want to come back on that? I've then got Councillor Barrett, I've got Councillor Carter. Sorry, yeah.
If I may, Mr. Chairman, I thought you were sort of taking us in order, and I seem to be missed out. Thank you.
I've got you on the list. Did you have something else you wanted to say, Councillor?
Yes, just a quick one. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Obviously, as Cabinet member, I get that information, but if other members want that information, they only have to email me and I can provide it to them as and when they request it.
Thank you very much. So I'm going to take Councillor Barrett and then Councillor Maybury. I'm sorry if I've got you out of order.
I'm a bee, so I'm high up the list, Margaret. Thank you for the report, and it's the first time I've seen that housing delivery sort of report, so it's good to see the sort of loftier aims translated into actions that are, deliverable and more understandable, and also to see action leads, names against each of those actions. Does that then translate into performance targets for each of those people named, so that they are, held to account over each of those areas? Because I think that really helps to see delivery on actions.
Thank you, Councillor, and partly links to Councillor Dawson's question around the ongoing work for monitoring delivery of this, of those action plans. The action plan, we have a dedicated officer that spends a majority of their time working through with colleagues to make sure that these actions are delivered. So those action leads, this work is very much part of their workload. As we touched upon earlier, it's almost become business as usual now for some of these action leads. It's their daily work, so it would feature in their objective settings for their work, definitely, yes.
Okay, and so those performance reviews with the line manager, take place
Yes,
what,
in line-
every 3 months or?
In line with
So-
our policy around one-to-ones, objectives, annual reviews, though I'm sure those discussions do take place. Yes.
Okay, driving those forward. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Maybury, I'm sorry if I missed you before.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I'm going to say to Mr. King, welcome, because it's the first time I've met you face to face. So it's nice to meet you.
Thank you. Nice to meet you too.
Thank you. I'm going to be controversial at the end, and everyone here is going to absolutely hate me, and probably some of the public, but I'm going to say something at the end. But first of all, I do have lots of questions about the report. If I can take you to 1.6 on page 15, where you're talking about new ways of living. The one item you have not mentioned is the actual amenity space of someone's home. There is a comment further through the report about community open space, etc. However, I'm mentioning this because I've recently viewed a new property, and I could not believe how tiny the outdoor space was when it was supposed to be for a family. If you've got 2 children, 2 adults in there, that was it. And I really do think that we miss something here. It may well be from looking at planning applications that developers are trying to put forward more properties per acre, hectare, however one would like to look at it. And I think that's something that Babergh District Council in particular, and probably Mid-Suffolk, should be more careful about. So that's my first. I've annotated all the paperwork, so I will be turning over pages.
Would it be helpful for me to answer that first point?
Yes,
before
if you wish, yes.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor. I am aware that we do, through the planning process, have minimum space standards for new build properties, so our properties will meet those minimum standards. As you mention and allude to, sometimes they are very small, but they do meet the minimum standard. There is a draft design specification for new build council developments, and that very much does acknowledge the need to maximise where we can outdoor amenity space, and alluded to in my presentation around health and well-being and biodiversity. We need to make sure that we address that where we can in future developments to maximise the available space.
Okay, I'm going to come back to you. Perhaps you misunderstood what I meant. This is private amenity space, i.e. within the fencing of a property. Because it's all very well having amenity space outside, and there are some lovely new play areas for children that I know that have come forward. However, as a mother of 4 and a granny of 4, I'm absolutely horrified that these play areas are next to suds basins, which are not fenced off because it's deemed that they're safer not fenced off than fenced. Because if you turn your back on a small child, they can move quicker than you can, and you may be distracted, and then there is a tragedy coming forward. I am talking about when a property is built, it should have proper, secure amenity space for that property to allow children to be playing outside without the need for those children or the district council or developers or whoever to expect that amenity sites are all play areas for all children. So that's what I'm talking about. And nowhere have I seen that you've mentioned that in this report.
Could I just interject? I think that's probably a planning matter rather than a district council.
Well, I'm going to come on to that because actually I think some of this report does step over into planning, because we're also talking about, and I've got loads of questions, Mr. Chairman, because you're also talking about pre-application advice. Well, that actually is a planning matter, so why is it in here? And from experience our pre-application advice does not work.
But I'm just getting a bit concerned. We're trying to ask somebody in the housing service to answer questions on planning issues.
But Mr. Chairman, what I've actually said, and I'm sorry, but Mr. King took it more forward, is I actually said that nowhere in this does it actually mention that housing includes looking at the private amenity space, because it says on 1.6, particularly in the housing sector, new ways of living have emerged and the meaning of housing has changed significantly. Well, during COVID it has, and people need their own private outdoor space as well. And that is what I'm arguing. I can move on. I'm happy to move on.
If you would, we'll take note of that. And there are probably matters here to refer to planning officers.
There's several. Thank you. Under 5.1, item 1, the housing market functions effectively. I'm sorry, that's a sweeping statement, and I would ask for your qualification on that, please.
Is that 5.1 of the action plan, or...?
No,
sorry?
Page 16, I'm still on your report. Thank you.
So if I could just clarify, these are the aims from our homes and housing strategy. So this is what we're aiming to achieve in the strategy.
But it's a sweeping statement, and I think we ought to be careful about sweeping statements, as with following on item 5 under that as well. Homes are in high quality, sustainable environments served by jobs and community facilities. In my own village where I live, where I'm a district councillor, the big issue at the moment is houses are being built, but there are no jobs. Everyone has to drive there. Let me just check.
Councillor Maybe, I agree with you that at the top of page 17, the statement, homes are in high quality, sustainable environments and so on, that we might well have an opinion that action, that target is not met, but I think that is a matter to take back to planning officers, which I think we should do.
And I understood that overview and scrutiny covers all points, so thank you for that. So I'm going to return to your presentation, which was on the screen. Thank you. There's a comment about CLTs and that these are being met with information. I totally disagree. The one that obviously I work with is Lavenham, and they have had severe issues about getting the funding for future projects, and I can take this up with you later. You mentioned that, I think you said 7? I'm not going to keep turning pages. Could you identify where they are, or would it not have been helpful for us all to have known where they are? Please.
Bear with me. They may be listed within the action plan. If you're happy for me just to try and locate that.
I recall seeing the number, but I don't recall seeing the actual parish.
No, and it would be useful to know.
Well, I think that's something which we can have the information on if Justin, you could take that away.
Okay, thank you very much. You were also talking about air source heat pumps. I have one in my own property. I think I'm a trailblazer for the council, as a councillor for that. But you don't actually mention if these are in new properties or whether they have been retrofitted in older properties.
In relation to those numbers, they are retrofitted.
They are retrofitted.
To replace either an oil or gas boiler.
Okay, thank you. And could the council also know, or this committee know, are they properties of a substantial age or are they fairly new? Because air source heat pumps work very effectively, but they do need really good insulation in a property.
Yes, as part of the decision making to replace with an air source heat pump, we do need to look at the overall thermal efficiency of a property to make sure that it is adequate and supports the use of a heat pump. So that does take place when deciding whether to replace with a heat pump.
I think I'm right that there's a pilot project, well, there probably more than one, but one in particular in one house that there'll be some learning from that, and perhaps when we have some information that we can feed back, then perhaps that could be done in some fashion.
Thank you very much. Following on from that, you're talking about landlords and they can apply for a grant for heating systems. I thought by law that all landlords had to provide proper effective central heating under a certain, I don't know what you call it, under a certain parameter. I thought it was by this year, 2021.
There is potential for what you might call a category 1 hazard if a landlord is renting a property without an effective heating system. Often those grants have been issued in response to allow landlords to improve the heating system in those properties. And also touched upon within the presentation was the funding that we have applied for to take action against landlords, private rented landlords, who are renting out properties with an F and a G EPC rating, so that we can take action to improve the thermal efficiency of those properties as well. That again may result in that landlord applying to us for a grant if they are eligible for funding to carry out improvement works.
Thank you. Now I'm going to move on to the part about SIL paying for school extensions. This is a joint report, I totally agree, but it would be good for the committee to actually understand where these extensions are being built, in which areas. Are they all in Mid-Suffolk? Are they all in Babergh? I have no idea.
I'm unable to answer that question specifically. I'd have to take it away to get that extra detail for you.
They are all in the infrastructure delivery plan. So there is a document that lists them all.
Thank you, but I probably have not read that. Thank you very much. I've been on holiday. I acknowledge that you have this tenant forum, which is very, very good. I am a bit concerned that 500 tenants replied, out of how many? And that 42% were very satisfied with repairs, but what of the other 58%? And I have experience of having to be very firm with the maintenance teams to actually get some repairs done within my ward. So that is of concern. I don't think you have to comment. If you wish, you do. And then I'll come to my controversial bit. And I know this is controversial, and I know everyone's going to look at me and say, what? But I think we are all digging ourselves into a very big hole with affordable housing. And I'll explain why. On one side of the equation, we have those who are in desperate need of a home. I acknowledge that, absolutely. However, I would suggest that colleagues and officers actually try talking to younger people, and I'm going to say between the ages of 20 and 30, for example, to see what they say. Because if these people are desperate for a home of their own, and they are only just slightly out of the need for an affordable, they can't get one. And there is beginning to become some imbalance, controversy, and blatant jealousy that some people can apply for an affordable home and get one, and others cannot. Those that apply for an affordable home, and this is the question for you, is if they have an affordable home, how many years is it before they can buy that house and then profit from it? And this is the imbalance that we are getting. And we are digging ourselves into a big hole because, as Councillor Osborne said, there is more and more need for affordable housing. And I am just flagging up now that it may well be a symptom of our society when we do not treat absolutely everyone fairly, without discrimination as to what their situation is. I have had someone recently say to me, I had to save, I had to work hard to buy my house, and I still struggle to pay for it. However, somebody else, and thankfully they don't always mention the names to me, has just said, well, I gave up my job and I got an affordable house. Now, I know this is controversial and everyone's situation is different, but Babergh, and I'm going to suggest Mid-Suffolk, are digging ourselves into a bigger and bigger hole that we need more affordable.
Was there a question there, please?
There is. Government policy. No, I'm not talking about government policy. I am just mentioning this because we are being told that somewhere in here, I think it was 111 that we're hoping to build. Councillor Osborne, I think, said we've got 130 odd. And I know within my own ward, my own village, we have more and more developers coming, and we are putting forward further more and more affordable housing.
Councillor Maybury, could I don't quite understand what the question is.
The question is, are we going to be overrun by requests for affordable housing, which then makes our housing policy and all these strategies absolutely obsolete? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I don't think that's a question that could be answered off the cuff here. I think that there is so much in that question that I think we're going to have to take that away. Councillor Osborne.
Yeah, I will say, you're absolutely right, Mr. Chairman. It's not a question for today. A lot of it is down to government policy, and our hands are tied by government policy. We have to abide by it. However, what I will say is there is a banding process, so everybody that puts in an application is banded based on their circumstances and their needs, and that includes financial situation as well. But I think that's a question away from this particular forum.
Yeah, I don't really want to labour the point, but I think the suggestion is that one could make oneself look worse off, and in the end you're better off because you can in due course get the home that you wanted at a cheaper price. But that's not something for today. I think that's something that is well worth officers looking at some point. But I don't think there's much we can say about that today, unless you're desperate to.
Only, Mr. Chairman, to add and follow on from Councillor Osborne's point, that we have an allocations policy that has been agreed that assesses everybody's individual application and their circumstances to ensure fairness in the allocation of the housing stock.
Thank you very much. Councillor Carter, I think I had you next, and Councillor Ekpenyong after Councillor Carter.
Yes, I'm going against advice here. I should probably. I'm going to declare that I am actually a councillor in a council home, and I can attest here how the importance of the citizen advice, because it's thanks to citizen advice that I actually ended up in a council home after 7 years of trying with a disability. So I can attest how difficult it is to get a property, yet so easy it is for other people. I wanted to go back to rough sleeping, and apparently we don't have, but if you look around, there are still a growing number of rough sleepers. And I'm trying to work out where the statistics for the reduction of them is coming. Because when I talk to them, because I'm one of the people who do, it turns out I'm one of the few people to actually approach rough sleepers to talk to them. It turns out either myself or maybe another councillor may do, but no one else approaches them. And I'm trying to work out where this is it based on only by people who's been reported, by people doing reporting, or by observations by people who actually have seen these rough sleepers? Why is it that it's only a few people that are approaching these rough sleepers? Are we employing people to go out there to search for rough sleepers and approach them? Is it being left to just the public to actually do it? And if it's down to the public, why are so few people approaching it? Is there more that we could be doing via advertising the number for contact for if you have if you see a rough sleeper? Is there more we could be doing with public outreach regarding rough sleeping? And is it possible we may need to look at the employment people or translators, because some of the rough sleepers I spoke to, I'm lucky in fact that I do speak some Bulgarian and some basic Slavic language, which some travellers do speak to, and they haven't understood when people have spoken to them. Do we need to employ somebody who speaks more than one language to approach these people? Regards that.
Would it be helpful just for me to...
yes, please.
Because we do have a dedicated team who are very, very responsive to individual reports of rough sleeping and are quickly out there same day, within hours often, to engage with the rough sleeper to provide support and advice. That is a very effective service that we provide. Is beneficial in terms of preventing further problems and often gets them the support that they need to get them either into temporary accommodation or the support services that they need. We can publicise. There is a dedicated email address and contact number for councillors, members of the public to report rough sleeping so that we can respond straight away. So we'll make sure that you've got those details.
Yes, I've got those, and it's thanks to I can attest that after reporting them, it has been very quick. I'm just trying to work out why so few, if they might have been out there for several weeks before someone had reached them, why it's only down to somebody like me, and why aren't more people approaching it? Why aren't we saying, giving more of a push, maybe on the BBC radio, things like that, to actually do a drive saying, statistically, rough sleeping is low, but you've got a pair of eyes on you. Why not do something about it and try to help somebody else? Because I think there's a stigma and a lot of fear down to COVID as well, why you wouldn't want to approach somebody. But we are all people, we need to do more on this.
Yeah, can we, I mean, I think there's a question in there somewhere. I think there's something to take away. I mean, we also have to bear in mind somebody who does speak to rough sleepers. Some of them actually prefer to be rough sleepers. Some people who just don't want to have the responsibility of a home to keep up. Councillor Osborne, and then I'm going on to Councillor Ekpingong.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, it's very fair to say that a lot of rough sleepers have very diverse needs, and it really calls and draws on the skills of our homelessness team, and they do accommodate that, and they have got obviously contacts there where they can go. Just recently we were awarded funding to enable us to recruit a mental health worker, so that person can relate to those people who have got mental health problems. Obviously it's a bit difficult to recruit because the mental health services are finding it that they're short-staffed anyway, but we have got funding to do that. And in regards to rough sleepers, I think it's right to say that where a rough sleeper wants us to engage with them, we will do that, and we will do it very, very quickly. Obviously, councillors, members of the public are the council's ears and eyes in a lot of cases. That was very recent with a rough sleeper that we had in Sudbury. But we must appreciate that a lot of those rough sleepers don't want to be engaged with. They want to keep, as you've alluded to, Mr. Chairman, they want to retain that way of living. But if they don't, then we're there. And even if they do have an opinion where they don't want to engage with us, we don't give up on them. We still visit them on a regular basis to try and resolve their problems. But the work that's being done with rough sleepers, is immense. And it's really, really coming on. And as I say, there'll be a review of the temporary accommodation to see where we can provide more houses for rough sleepers. So there's a great deal of work being done there, including the breakdown of possibly languages as well.
Thank you very much. I've got Councillor Ekping-Yong. Then when we've heard from Councillor Ekping-Yong, can we start to think about what recommendations we would be likely to make to officers, to Cabinet or to Council? Thank you. Councillor Ekping-Yong.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, I'd like to completely endorse the comments of Mr. King and Councillor Osborne with regards to rough sleepers. In my experience, and I do engage with them, obviously I'm no expert, but I engage them as one human to another, and I have had the chance to report that to the department concerned, and I think the response has been more than acceptable in terms of the timeliness of it and the feedback following my report. So I don't think Councillor Carter should feel that he's the only one engaging with these rough sleepers. There are lots of other people do and do report it, and action is taken as much as is required. So that's on that point. I just come back to Councillor Dawson's comment regarding the aims that are listed in section 5 of the document, and I think she has a point really, because actually when you read these aims, they read more like statements rather than aims, and I think it's all to do with the way that they've been phrased, and I think that certainly could be looked at, because there is a sort of sense that in the way that they're written that they're a done deal, which clearly is not the case. And then finally, I think coming back to the issue of homelessness, I think one of the points that Mr. King made was that we do have a record, I think Councillor Osborne alluded to this too, of a register of people looking for homes. What is not clear to me, possibly other councillors, is actually how many people are at any one point are effectively homeless and looking for homes, and how's that trajectory moving and how we're coping with it, I think is kind of where Councillor Dawson was trying to get to with that particular aspect of her question. And I think that's an important thing to understand, and I do appreciate that it is a moving feast, because it'll be one thing, a set of data at one point and another set of data at another point, but I think it would be good to understand the trajectory of that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So, do I have any suggestions from anyone as to the recommendations? Obviously, we will accept the report. We'll thank the officers for presenting the report and the information, and certainly the answers to the questions. Councillor Scarf.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I mean, I'm quite happy with the two first recommendations, but I think we need some further recommendations, and one of these in particular refers to just the Mid-Suffolk members of the committee. And I would move a motion, which I've given notice to Robert, so he's already got it typed already, hopefully. In relation to action point 3.13, this committee recommends that urgent action is taken to build improved, joined-up working with citizens' advice, and recognises that this is a top priority. Furthermore, that consideration is given to creating a jointly funded post by Cabinet in order to move this priority and critical area forward. And my thinking there is citizens' advice in other areas have actually adopted this model with some varying degrees of success, but I think if a jointly funded post, and it is down to negotiations between citizens' advice and this authority, if we agree this as to who is the employer and etc. I think it could be enormously useful. In my earlier comments, I said I was aware of issues, particularly with Mid-Suffolk CA, and I think this could be a way of actually resolving that issue moving forward. it is so crucial, I think, that we have a very good working relationship with Citizens Advice, because we can divert inquiries through Citizens Advice. They inevitably get them, that would come to the housing team, and indeed vice versa. And I also have some experience of it through my work as a trustee on the Stowmarket Relief Trust, and the feedback that we get as a relief trust in terms of helping people who are quite often absolutely desperate and have nothing when they move into a house, and the way that we react to them from the Housing Solutions team, and in the way that the trust supports them in their efforts to get established. So I'm quite happy to move that motion.
So that's a proposal. We have a seconder, I think, Councillor Carter, that would be considered by the Mid-Suffolk members, unless Mid-Suffolk members only, unless it's something that no, I'm getting head shaken in terms of Babergh.
May I, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, please do.
I'm sorry, I can't see the point in employing one person to actually liaise between the housing department and Citizens Advice. I don't think that's.
So it's not something that
I would not
Babergh
support
members
that.
would consider, but it is a.
Well, I wouldn't. I can't speak for my colleagues, but I would not.
Well, unless I get a proposal from somebody from the Babergh side.
So can you just clarify that again, exactly what he said? We're slightly confused here.
I mean, basically, it's a recommendation that in order to have closer working relationships between housing officers and Citizens Advice in Stowmarket, that there is a jointly funded post, or a closer way of working, which may well be a jointly funded post, so that there could be a person either in Stowmarket or indeed in the housing office here who would make sure that a person who's got these needs doesn't fall through the cracks of not, if they've got a housing need, if they're demonstrating a housing need but they've got other needs, or if they're demonstrating other needs and they've got a housing need, that this person is dealt with as an individual, all of their needs are looked at, rather than one group of people looking after part of it and the housing people looking after the housing side. So that I understand is what we have a proposer and a seconder for on the Mid-Suffolk side, and we will obviously have to vote for that separately from the Mid-Suffolk side.
Could I just ask then, could perhaps Councillor Osborne advise us in Babergh how we do this at the moment? Is it addressed or not?
Sorry, Mr. Chairman, I did have my hand up. I was going to say I wouldn't recommend a dedicated officer to deal with this particular issue. It would need to come within the resources of existing officers to deal with. And in fact, at Babergh, it actually does. I'm not sure how it sits with Mid-Suffolk, but I wouldn't recommend the recommendation as a dedicated officer. We need to put officers in much more priority areas, although I agree that is a particular priority, but not as a dedicated officer situation.
Thank you, that's helpful.
Thank you. Councillor Muller.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I must admit, I don't think, I do actually agree with Jan Osborne, really, from the Mid-Suffolk point of view. There is liaison between Citizens Advice and our housing team, which I think is adequate, but I couldn't support like a part-time officer and that type of thing. So, no, that's how I feel about it, Chair.
Thank you very much. Councillor Ekping, I think you had your hand up a little while ago. Was that in connection with this?
Not in connection with this, Mr. Chairman. I want to propose another recommendation.
Please do.
So I would like to, in the light of the comments I made earlier during the meeting, I'd like to a recommendation to be that we have an overhaul of the presentation of this report, particularly trying to eliminate the number of actions that are ongoing, which, and making sure that other actions have proper timestamps and the commentary related to them are appropriate. I think there's a little bit of a confusion here between reviewing the strategy, which we want to do on an annual basis, which seems more than reasonable, and actually scrutinizing the specific actions that have been set forward to take place. And I think that clarity needs to be brought forward in the next report.
Thank you. Do other members generally agree with what Councillor Ekpignon has said? Councillor Muller?
Yes, I'm happy to support that. Thank you, Chair.
Right, okay. Is there anything else anyone would like to add to the recommendations? I'll take Councillor Maybury first and then Councillor Morley.
Thank you. I thought that we were going to make some recommendations to planning regarding the pre-application, which I do have issues with from casework, and also the issue about the affordable housing. And no, we'll rewind. Sorry, it was the space that properties are being built with.
There's the outside space provision.
Yeah, their own private amenity space, i.e. within the boundary of their property. Thank you.
Councillor Morley.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to remind Mid-Suffolk councillors that Mid-Suffolk already funds many thousands of pounds towards the Mid-Suffolk CAB for the express purpose of supporting this area. It's a bit like buying a dog and barking yourself. You're paying somebody else to do that function, and I don't personally see any need for jointly funded. It would be asking Citizens Advice to give us some money back to do what we've already asked them to do. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Morley.
Sorry?
Couldn't quite hear what she was saying, I'm
I
afraid.
think what Councillor Morley was saying was that Mid-Suffolk District Council, as do Babergh, provides some funding towards Citizens Advice.
Yeah.
And Councillor Morley was questioning whether it was reasonable for the Citizens Advice then to use some of that funding for a jointly funded post. Right, we've got several ideas for recommendations, but we haven't got anything written out unless you have, Rob.
I have a bit, Chair. Would that be helpful?
Would it be helpful to hear from Rob? And then if we take them one at a time, if people want to clarify or seek clarification on any one of these, then we'll do them one at a time. Thank you.
Right. Thank you, Chair. Apologies for the delay there. So, just to confirm with the proposal that was put forward by Councillor Scarf, is that a Mid-Suffolk only?
Yes, so we'll take that at the very end.
We'll take that separately. I'm afraid I put it in first because it came up first.
Well,
I won't start it first. We can start in a different order. And the other one that I have so far is that the report is reviewed with regards to the presentation of actions and the inclusion of day-to-day work in the action plan. I've got the point from Councillor Maybury. I'm not quite sure how to word that, Chair, with regards to pre-application.
Can we just express concern about the availability of private amenity space within developments, and express? I mean, we're going to have to vote for these each of them separately. And the other was to express concern about the adequacy of the pre-application service. Yeah, pre-application service.
Those in there, Chair. Do you wish to take these all separately?
We will have to take them all separately, I think, yes.
Councillor, just that you inform me why I am currently in spasm. My arm's stuck under the table, so any vote I have to take do verbally at the moment because I can't move. Sorry.
I'll come to you in a minute, Councillor McCraw. I'm just trying to get us to establish what our recommendations might be. Right, have you got...
Nearly there, Chair.
Right, thank you.
Mr Chairman, I'm sorry to interrupt, but are we going to be much longer for a vote? Because I really do need to go for a little longer.
Well, I don't think we're very far away from a vote, and then we will have a break. You will be able to get some fresh air then. We're just trying to just sort out the precise wording of, there could be 4 or 5, well, probably at least 5 recommendations.
I won't
Emily.
be 2 moments, Chair. I apologise for all.
We'll come to that, yeah.
Chair, I just wondered actually whether it would be opportune to take a quick adjournment so that we could take the opportunity to craft some recommendations to support the committee.
That's a brilliant idea. Yes, now I think Councillor McCraw wanted to say something. Did you want to say that, and then we'll take a break?
All I was going to say was that this is a review, I think, of the housing strategy, and it seems to me that some of the recommendations speak to matters of planning policy and the planning team that may be out with the control of the housing department, and I wondered if that would be a consideration.
You're absolutely right, and I think that's why we will make some recommendations to planning officers. I mean, the point is that several members have made, they're all in the action plan, and so if we're reviewing the action plan, and they're in the strategy, so when we're reviewing the strategy, so if the strategy says we're aiming for homes are of high quality, sustainable environments, served by jobs, community facilities, appropriate green space, effective transport links, and other necessary infrastructure, I think we have to, if we've got comments to make, we need to make those comments, but we, as you say, we need to make them in the right direction, not expect that housing officers are going to wave the magic wand over all of these aspects. Right, so we'll have, shall we have 10 or 15, a 10-minute break? Do you think 10 minutes is enough, or would you rather 15? If we can have a 10-minute break, we'll all be back here at 11:52. That would be great. Right, thank you. Welcome back. We're now going to hear from the Governance Officer the recommendations that we are about to vote on. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair. So I will just read out the ones that we have so that everyone is clear ahead of the vote. So with relation to Councillor Scarf's motion, that is unchanged except that the parenthesis has been added in terms of making it this committee MSDC. So that's specifically related to that point. So other than that, there's no change to the wording. The other ones are that the content of the action plan was noted and the committee asked for further information on the day-to-day activities of the action plan, and this will allow for changes to be made and reviewed by the officer in line with the Assistant Director for Housing as well. So you can take back the comments from this meeting with regards to that as well. The next one is that the Homes and Housing Strategy and Homelessness and Reduction Sleeping Strategy be reviewed twice yearly, which was the point that was put forward by Councillor Dawson. So that's that one. With regards to the other points on that were planning related, after taking advice from the monitoring officer on that point, they will be recorded in the minutes and passed on to the relevant officers, but it's advised that it shouldn't be as recommendations within this report. The members decide. If that's clear, Chair?
That's clear to me. Councillor Dawson, sorry.
I thought we'd agreed that we weren't on the recommendations of Councillor Osborne, and we weren't really interested in inserting here the jointly funded post by the Cabinet.
Well, Councillor Osborne spoke on behalf of Babergh District Council, and it will be up to the Mid-Suffolk District Council members whether or not they vote for or against that as a recommendation.
Yes,
but
but
it is only to Mid-Suffolk District Council. It's not to Babergh.
Can I just come back on this? Because this was what happened with the transport at the last meeting. Do you remember? All the Mid-Suffolk voted for it and Babergh didn't want it. And we don't want to find ourselves in a situation today where we vote against this, we're overruled by then, and then this goes forward to our Cabinet.
Now, you're not being asked to vote on this. This is a vote for Mid-Suffolk members only and will only affect Mid-Suffolk District Council. It won't affect Babergh at all.
Okay. Thank you for the clarification.
So, are we ready now to hear the... Are we going to hear the recommendations one at a time, or are they all on the screen now?
They'll all be on the screen, Chair, but as I am aware that some members aren't able to, I will read it out again when I go to the vote so that those answering verbally can get those points. So I will start the vote of that the content of the action plan was noted and the committee asked for further information on the day-to-day activities of the action plan. So that vote is now in progress, members. And could I please ask Councillor Carter for your vote verbally, please? Oh, you've got... Fantastic. Thank you, Councillor. And Councillor Maybury.
Could you repeat it?
Yes, of course. That the content of the action plan was noted and the committee asked for further information on the day-to-day activities of the action plan. Thank you. Thank you, Chair. All votes have now been received, and that is 9 votes for and unanimous. So I will now move to the next vote, which is for both sets of members, which is that the Homes and Housing Strategy and Homelessness and Rough Sleeping Strategy be reviewed twice yearly. So if you vote for, that will be for going to reviewing it twice yearly, and if you vote against, that will be for keeping it as the annual review, as we have done today. So I will now start the vote on that, which will now show in progress. Councillor Margaret Maybury, can I take your vote, please? Thank you, Chair. That is 7 votes for and 2 against, so that is carried. And then finally, the last one will be for Mid-Suffolk members only, and that is all in front of you, so that is now in progress. So in relation to action point 3.13, this committee, MSDC, recommends that urgent action is taken to build improved joined-up working with citizens' advice and recommends that this is a top priority. Furthermore, that consideration is given to creating a jointly funded post by Cabinet in order to move this priority and critical area forward. Thank you. All votes have now been received by the Mid-Suffolk members, and that is 3 votes for and 2 against, so that is carried.
Thank you very much. That was a bit of a marathon, wasn't it? But thank you very much. Thank you to the officer for sticking with it all for 2 hours. Yeah, we're very grateful to you, and please take our thanks back to your colleagues for the work that they've done in presenting preparing the report, all the statistics and so on. Thank you very much indeed. So we are now moving on to item 8A. I think that's right. 8A is the information bulletin on customer service, a customer service update. This is for noting, but there will be an opportunity to ask questions of clarity. So I'll ask Samantha Lake and Sarah Wilcock to introduce the paper, and then we'll go into questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair, and good afternoon, councillors. So just by way of a short introduction to the information bulletin, it was requested by Overview and Scrutiny that there was some headline information provided for face-to-face customer services for the time period the 1st of April 21 until the 31st of July 21. As you can see in the information bulletin, in Stowmarket we have seen 108 customers during that period, and in Sudbury 314. The information bulletin shows the number of customers accessing our services during this period, and the majority have been so to see us for online form support and also to provide information for evidence for benefits and housing information. I have noted in the report there is a difference between Stowmarket and Sudbury in terms of the volumes of customers, and in the main we have seen that a number of customers have wished to take us up on telephone appointments rather than coming in to see us face to face. I would like to note at this stage that since writing this report, the delivery of our pop-up services at Shotley and Hadley will be commencing, however it won't be at the end of September but from the 4th of October, and this was requested by the libraries themselves just due to some changes in locations in relation to where we're actually sat within the library. I'd just like to say that as this is an information bulletin, there is no recommendations proposed as a result of this report, and I'll hand over to the Chair for any questions for clarity. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do we have any questions? Councillor Ayres.
Yes, and thank you for all the work that you have. But I do have some questions, only because, as you know, I'm so heavily involved. Thank you for the work behind the access point, because it looks far more cheerful now. Sadly, we still haven't managed to move the screen because it's reflecting on the lights, so the staff says it's terribly difficult to use, so that needs to be moved. And the other thing is proof of life. We still have a lot of people coming into the town hall, and the town hall have kept a tally of how many people still thinking, I know we've advertised it, we've talked about it, but people still don't appreciate that they need to go to the library. So I don't know how many more times we need to put that out. Still trying. However, it's average of about 10 a day, and on market days about 19 people still come into which is now the tourist information. So we just need to, I don't know how we're going to publicise it more, but you know, that is there. So that's just, and this proof of life, we do have quite a few people want proof of life. if you'd like to explain to people who may not understand what that's for.
Yes, so Proof of Life is a service that we do provide at Babergh and Mid-Suffolk District Council. It's very popular actually in Mid-Suffolk, as you've mentioned as well. It seems to be in Babergh, and it's usually for foreign pensions, and it's to provide proof of kind of identity, and it's a stamp that needs to be done by an official. The reason quite a lot of people like a council to undertake that activity is because it's quite often charged for in other services. So, for example, a legal representative may charge for that service, and it's something that we don't charge for at the council. In terms of your questions, Councillor, if I can just respond to a couple of them, and thank you so much for your comments. In terms of Proof of Life, very happy to advertise that and make sure that we can maybe specifically talk about that when we're talking about the customer access point service. In terms of the numbers coming into the town hall, I appreciate that it does seem to be a lot of customers also coming to see us to talk about tourist information wherever possible. We're trying to signpost everybody in the right direction. So appreciate that, and I'll do my very best to advertise something specifically looking at Proof of Life, but also very comfortable that we are there on those 2 days a week, and please feel free to let people know to pop in and see us, and we're more than comfortable to do a Proof of Life when we're
But I will say the staff that you've had in there, because I go in because I only live around the corner, so it's a pain that I'm so close. But I do thank them, and they do, and they're very good. But the other thing is, some of them have indicated, and I found a tutor that could do it, would like to learn British Sign Language, because that is something that quite often is needed. So if we can have that as a recommendation.
So I know that we've spoken about British Sign Language before, so thank you for saying that again, Councillor Ayres. And I think you were going to send me some information of a local course that you thought might be most useful for my team. So I'm more than happy to explore that once I've received the details. Thank you, Councillor.
I didn't think there'd be many questions. I had Councillor Barrett first, then Councillor Maybury, then Councillor Ekpingham.
Me first.
Please.
Sorry. Thank you. Morning. Or afternoon. It's interesting looking at your figures. We've got, and am I right in thinking that you've only been open 2 days a week in Stowmarket during this period? Normally it'd be 5?
Yes, we have.
Right.
2 days a week.
So those figures are based on only 2 days a week, and yet you've got more people coming to Sudbury than you're seeing at Stowmarket. Well, 3 times as many. Can you account for that, or?
So I think historically we have seen higher volumes of people requiring face-to-face services in Babergh versus Mid-Suffolk. In terms of the Stowmarket numbers, as I mentioned, we have also seen a lot of customers requiring or being quite comfortable with a telephone appointment rather than actually wanting to come in and see us face-to-face. If they would prefer a telephone appointment, what we will do is we will call them back at a convenient time, so that they're not worried about the phone bill, if you will, because it could take up to 45 minutes to an hour depending on what that inquiry is related to. So we have seen a greater uptake of people wanting to use that service in Stowmarket.
Yeah. Well, I guess because Sudbury is a market town, they're coming to Sudbury anyway to do their various bits of business, and that's why they're face-to-face. Well, it seems obvious that you need to put more resources into Sudbury and less into Stowmarket in the future, because you've got the demand there. You've got evidence that there is greater demand in Sudbury, and yet presumably you're going to go back to 5 days a week in Stowmarket when there is less demand. Doesn't seem to make sense.
So I feel our face-to-face services are always under review, and we've always said that we'll look at the demand across both locations, and of course we'll start to deliver our pop-up services again across the other 2 sites in Babergh, which will also support with seeing those additional volumes of customers. In terms of the Sudbury location, we do have 2 offices there on those 2 days a week, so although we are seeing on average about 10 customers per officer, that's that's quite doable, if you will, within that time period at this point in time. But of course, we will measure the demand over time and review it as we've committed to.
Well, it's probably about 24 a week if you count over 13 weeks. So I was assuming you weren't counting the whole of July, April, May, June, 13 weeks. So that seems to be about 24 people a week over 2 days.
Yeah.
So should it be 2 officers still? Because the day I popped in, there was only 1 officer.
There is always 2 officers there. Someone might have been on lunch for a period of time, but there is always 2 officers there for the day.
Okay. Your report talks about mediation. Is that in your report? About on page 86. Is that part of your report? Or have I gone into the next one?
I think you've gone into the next report.
Okay, I'll save that for our next item. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Maybury.
Yes, thank you. This also relates to Sudbury. I attended with a resident who was very, very unsure of approaching anyone else. And sadly, all the computer equipment was not working. And we had a high on time for about an hour, but it then came back on stream, which was very useful. Both of the officers who were there were very helpful. I do not deny that, but it was very, very frustrating for the resident who had particularly asked for me to attend. We'd made arrangements, we had all the paperwork with us, and then the equipment wasn't working.
Was that a question?
The question is, how do we make sure that the equipment works?
Well, we'll take that away. I mean, it relies on not just the officers who are there, but it relies on a lot of other things besides. Thank you. Councillor Eppingham.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Actually, the officer, in response to Councillor Barrett, has highlighted what I suspected was an issue with the statistics being presented on the first page of their report in regards to the number of customers being seen at Stowmarket versus Sudbury. And I think this kind of led Councillor Barrett down a particular path in terms of resourcing. And I think actually it would be good to actually count in the number of customers that were dealt with by telephone as well, because they are still customers, whether we deal with them face-to-face or via the telephone. And I think that would perhaps show a slightly different balance. So that's the point I want to make there, because Councillor Barrow already asked the question I wanted to ask. On the next page, we talk about customers not being able to, or not understanding that they can upload information through the online forms themselves. And I just wondered what we're doing on that website to make it more clear to potential customers that that's what they can do and how they can do it. Because clearly, if they're clear about that, they wouldn't be needing to come for a face-to-face or to approach you by phone. And I think this is a sort of an endemic thing about council websites. I don't think they are as clear as they could possibly be when to people using them as how best to use them. And then finally, you talk about launching a digital skills support and access, and has that actually happened, and what were the initial feedback from that?
Okay, thank you, Councillor. So I'll take those questions in turn. So in terms of the telephone appointments, apologies, because it was focused on face-to-face, I didn't want anyone to think that the numbers were not reflective of people who had specifically requested face-to-face, but I'm very comfortable to make sure that future reports demonstrate the telephone appointments, because they are much longer appointments as well, so very happy to do so. In terms of making sure that our website's clear, we do look at our website and review it regularly to try and make sure that any feedback from customers we're trying to respond to in terms of making the website information clearer. I think for those particular customers, quite often they had been quite used to coming in and providing that information. So it just become maybe a habit rather than it necessarily being something that wasn't made really clear on the website. They hadn't really looked for the information before. So it's something that, that we were able to support them whilst they were in the library with us, for example, to actually show them how to do that, so that it did make it much easier for them moving forwards. And in terms of digital skills support, we are shortly launching that in terms of it will consist of online training which can be self-supported by officers, but also there will be a face-to-face offer as well. And we have also sent out a survey to our tenants to understand their digital skills needs as well. So we'll be looking at our tenants specifically as well as part of that particular offer, which we'll be looking to explain more to councillors shortly.
Thank you very much. Councillor McCraw and then Councillor Scarf.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, the microphone wasn't quite responding. I think this might help answer the questions raised by Councillor Barrett regarding the level of service provision and the relative levels of service provision between Sudbury and Stowmarket. After these figures were prepared for this meeting, I asked if we could get some figures for Sudbury for August. So I've got some updated figures for August, and they show pretty much the same pattern of use. But one thing that did emerge from that was the average time spent with each customer, and that's approximately 13 minutes. Now, if we multiply the maximum number of face-to-face contacts at Sudbury, which was 107 in July, multiply that by the 13 minutes, we have something under just over 23 hours, say 24 hours, of face-to-face provision. Now, that's across the course of a month. And of course, in the course of that month, we would be open for at least 8 days, 8 and a fraction, with 2 officers. So we're providing, if you like, let me think, we're providing potentially 4 times as much officer time as the face-to-face time allowed. Well, allowing for the fact they have other things to do, I think that speaks to probably about the right level of service provision, allowing gaps in between and so on. The other thing I was going to say was that it's clear that this pattern of use in Stowmarket, considering the length of a contact there might be 45 minutes to an hour, so say about 3 times as long, the fact that it's a third of the number of calls actually balances out in terms of minutes used. So I would suggest, and I think that's what the evidence shows, that having any more days at Sudbury would be ineffective. It wouldn't improve the service, but reducing the days to 1 would also be ineffective. I think the level at 2 days per week seems to be set about right, and the evidence supports that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That's really helpful. Thank you. Councillor Barrett.
Thank you very much. I'm really struck by some of the figures that we're being told about here. We've heard that the telephone calls can take 40 minutes, but the face-to-face appointments last about 13 minutes. Why? I mean, it sounds as if it's more efficient to run a face-to-face operation, doesn't it?
Well, I guess it's down to the type of question. If
that's
you've
why
got
I'm asking the question.
90% of the queries are in fact dealt with on first contact, and particularly at Sudbury. That's a face-to-face operation. I'm going to be going and visiting Sudbury this week, and also the Stowmarket call centre hasn't been possible up till now due to COVID restrictions, but now it seems to be sensible. So I'll get some direct contact, and if I can feed it back to the committee at any future point, I'll be happy to do so.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, one of the points I wanted to highlight about Stowmarket, and I'm sure this is not unique because I'm sure it happens at Sudbury as well, the town council officers also get inquiries about services by Mid-Suffolk. I can see Sudbury gets a reasonable number of inquiries about waste services. I certainly know that we get inquiries about waste services and complaints about waste services, and we refer them onwards. So in terms of customer contact, the Town Council also gets a considerable number of inquiries which we deal with directly or signpost them to one of the councillors within the town, or to the County Council or to Mid-Suffolk. So it's a snapshot of where we're at, but there are other service providers, and I'm sure CA in Suffolk also gets inquiries about it, because there's a general level of misunderstanding about what each council's role and responsibilities is. Everyone says the council, and Stowmarket, obviously having offices in the town, get a fair proportion of other councils' inquiries as well.
Thank you. Councillor Maybury.
About Sudbury. I just hope that...
Is it a question? Sorry.
It is.
Right, you said a comment. I was just concerned me.
Mr. Chairman, perhaps I'll just pass. Thank you.
No, if you've got a question, please ask it.
No, thank you.
Councillor Carter.
Regards the Stowmarket, we have this issue that's been reported again with Disability Forum, how difficult it is to get into that access point. From a scooter perspective, it's quite a horrendous door to go through, and it offers very little way of actually any privacy to actually ask any questions with computers there. I did wonder, with the increase, the preference is for phone calls, yet with some of our members, it is they are, with learning disability especially, with a phone call you can't get the same degree as you would face-to-face, but they can't get into the building. Is it possible to look at doing things like Teams, where it's a camera, so it's visual cues for members, for people to actually get the face-to-face experience but not necessarily have to do it? Also, if you're doing that, is it not possible to have, rather than people in the station, but actually have monitors, so you could have the officers in a central location and then radiate out to do meetings in further things, like have an access point in the libraries, so somebody especially could go press a button and want to speak to somebody from customer services? Would that not be a more accessible way of doing it, rather than having the single access point building, if you get what I mean with that? Granted, it would have the issue of the computer gremlins from time to time, but would that not be easier to be able to reach more customers without having to send people out to separate access points? And there was something else, but for life of me it's completely gone, so I might have to ask another question later.
I shall try and respond to those. So in terms of the access specifically at Stowmarket, I know we have had the Disability Forum come and view our premises and try and make some recommendations which we have put into place to try and improve that access point, to make sure that everybody does feel as though that they can enter comfortably. Since the pandemic, we have also limited the numbers of people that come in, so it is a one-to-one in that main office area to allow greater space for that person to have a conversation with the officer. In terms of the Teams appointments and that ability to be able to deliver virtual kind of appointments, it is something that we are exploring, and we are working with Mid-Suffolk Citizens Advice on that also, because I know that that's something that they're currently offering in a few locations, so we are working with them actively on that.
Thank you. Councillor Dawson.
Yes, my query is very quickly. Our Chief Executive, Mr. Chauvet, very kindly always said we would have some sort of communication with residents in Hadley Library. That's been pulled, and Sudbury's is obviously also diminished. We've got 10,000 people in Hadley, and it serves a larger, wider community. So, is something going to be done or coming back there? Or is that now just being shelved, contrary to what was originally agreed?
Are we talking about Hadley Library?
Yes.
Councillor? Yes, that's coming back from week commencing the 4th of October.
And will that be a person sitting there, or is it another sort of just a laptop sitting at a desk?
It's 2 people sitting there.
Lovely, thank you very much.
Thank you. Are there... I don't see any other hands. I don't see any other questions.
I'd really like to, we've focused a bit on coverage and so on. I'd like to just ask about the sort of level of officer, their training and their background. What grade officer are they who are attending? Are they both the same or for both locations?
In terms of our officers who are attending the customer access points, they are the same grade, so it's grade 3.
Grade 3, right, so that's admin level. Do you have grade 4 officers available?
We do, and they're usually based in a customer access point alongside the grade 3 officers, so they're the team leaders, and they're usually in a customer access point. So it's 2 officers, one is usually a grade 3, one is a grade 4.
So one is a grade 3, but only the grade 3's visit, do you mean?
So there's 2 officers in each customer access point, so when we go to say, when we start again at Hadley, it will be 2 officers, one is a grade 3, one is a grade 4 officer.
And that's the same at Sudbury, is it?
Yes. The majority of the time, wherever that's available, yes.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody. This item, this information bulletin is for noting. Thank you very much for presenting the paper. Thank you very much indeed. So now, we've got some people coming to present the information bulletin on antisocial behaviour, but we need to do a bit of swapping around of people in order to accommodate them. Yeah, certainly, yeah. Thank you very much. So we now have Peter Watson and Ian Rafferty to introduce their paper, the Information Bulletin on Antisocial Behaviour. This is for noting only, but you may ask questions for points of clarification when they have finished their presentation. Thank you very much. We are ready when you are.
Well, good afternoon, councillors. I'm Peter Watson, I'm the Community Safety Project Manager at Babergh, Suffolk District Council. My colleague.
Good afternoon, my name's Ian Rafferty, I'm the Community Safety Officer.
This is our first baptism, if you like, into the Overview and Scrutiny Committee. So I take everyone has seen the paper that has been drawn up. Okay. Would you like me to just walk through that, or would you like me
if everybody has... Are there one or two points that you particularly want to bring to our attention?
I think what I'd like to do is that I started work at Behaviour last December. Just give you a very brief overview of the travel since then.
Yeah.
So as you're probably aware, there was the Anthony Douglas report commissioned last year. From that was the platform for us to take a review of all the policies and procedures within the ASB world to do with training about communications, both internally and externally. The platform was regarding networking. So the paper I've done is just an overview of what has been happening during the last 9 months. I've broken it down to certain particular areas. Within our area of community safety, what we have actually done is increase capacity and capability. Last year it was just one professional lead, Francine Jones, We've now migrated away from that. We're looking at a new restructure from next month, where potentially we'll appoint another ASB officer. The work that we do covers obviously both Babergh and Mid Suffolk. What I can say is that from the review process that we've done, we are in a much better, healthier place. And what I mean by that is we've put everything under the microscope regarding our policies and procedures. I've done a complete review of the community trigger process. There's 23 recommendations from that. I've looked at and reviewed the panel meetings, which were chaired, that we used to be chaired bi-monthly. I've now increased that to a monthly process. What was needed was a software package to hold our cases and communicate externally and internally. So it's a better case management. That's called eSIMS, which has been rolled out. We've been doing training on that side. Also, many months ago, done some training for councillors to give a much broader picture of the complexity of ASB. I think ASB in itself creates perhaps just a very narrow tunnel vision of what we actually do get involved in with respect. It is a very wide subject, both from civil and criminal torts. So you can cover hate crime, you have domestic homicide reviews, county lines, criminal exploitation, radicalisation. There's a whole broad depth of different subjects which requires different skill sets. So that's why Ian and I are here. So a little bit about perhaps the background would be relevant. I was 5 years management in ASB at Ipswich Borough Council. Prior to that, I spent 25 years in fraud investigations in the public and private sector. Ian's background?
I come from a policing background, served with Suffolk Police for 30 years.
So you can see between us, we have extensive experience in different fields. And what we've been looking at is not just about what needs to be changed and addressed from perhaps last year, but providing a platform so both our staff are trained, which they have been, on the new legislation, but also looking to the future about where we sit and what we can do proactively, because I don't like to have a reactive stance. I think we need to be on the front foot. So we've been gathering the momentum from that side. And the report here is a flavour of where we've been and what we're doing regarding little snippets, regarding CCTV, perhaps the mediation side, which I know you want to perhaps allude to, and also the community trigger process. And on that point, the community trigger process, from April 2016 to January of this year, there hadn't been one single case review conducted. Since I've been here, we've had 5 applications, and not one of those has gone to the appeal stage. So it's effective, it's working. This came about from the ASB Awareness Week in May, June, everyone think it was. We've engaged with the public, we've engaged with the police. We've got our networking going on this afternoon. Ian, do you want to just tell me about the point we've got this afternoon, please? It's important.
Yeah, it is. It's part of an ongoing process where we're liaising with our partners. This afternoon I'll be talking to the police liaison officer for schools. Effectively what we're trying to do is to get our message out to young people, not just via schools, but via other clubs and other youth organisations. So one of the strands we're working on is to raise awareness of ASB with a target age group in schools. Part of that is re-engaging with the Crucial Crew. I don't know if you're aware of Crucial Crew, multi-agency educational tool, talking to children about their safety, online safety, as well as in real life. So lots and lots of strands going on. It's ongoing, and as Peter said, we're hoping to become proactive rather than reactive.
Thank you, Ian. The other part is about personalising our work. Our customers, they're not numbers, they're real people with real issues. And what I'm looking to do is engineer what's called an ASB champion. This is someone who's been through the process of being a victim all the way through to the courts, and using that person to engage with a potential victim. It takes away the officialdom. I used it when I was at Ipswich Borough Council to great effect. So that's the other avenue we're looking at, is making sure that we communicate with our public and they have the availability to communicate with us. So it's a very personal matter. I could go on a bit more, but if
no, that's fine, thank you. Councillor Muller.
Yes, thank you very much indeed, gentlemen, for your chat there. Yes, you say obviously liaising with the police on a regular basis. Do you actually liaise with the engagement officer for Mid Suffolk, PC Henriksen? because he meets our street meets once a month, which I join him at as well. And I wonder whether you you mentioned the school's liaison police officers, and I just wonder whether you met with the engagement officer as well.
Can I say that, Peter?
Yes, please.
Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor. Thank you for your question. Yes, Stefan is somebody that I've already liaised with.
Good.
In fact, I liaised with him prior to during the compilation of this very report. What I wanted from him was his view of ASB in his area, where the hotspots were and what his real concerns were. Now, that's only an email back and forth with Stefan, but as I get longer or further into this role, we'll certainly develop that relationship. And what we want to do together with our partners is to get that message out. We had a street meet pop-up event in Sudbury in July, in and around ASB. We were there with the police, answering questions from members of the public and really trying to raise awareness amongst them. And part of that is hoping to give them the feeling that they were able to speak to us, we would listen, and we would then offer solutions.
Thank you. Would that be possible for you to do a similar arrangement with Stefan? His next one, I believe, is on the 16th of October next month, which again I will also be attending with that. But just to give you an example, we had the modern slavery officer with us last month or this month, and also the missing persons officer. I think that would be very useful, and we do get very good engagement with members of the public.
Yeah, Councillor, I agree entirely, and that was something we'll work on.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair. Thank you.
Could I just add to that? It's important. It's an important question. So, from the police engagement side and monthly panel meetings, Chair, they are invited and they do attend. But also, importantly, we're part of what's called an Area Tactical Command Group meeting, which is senior police officers dealing with high-risk crime, shall we say. And so we have a place on that panel, and we engage with certain elements, which is the higher level of ASB. So we have got that communication, and we are recognised, and I'll be off from there. Thank you very much. You're welcome.
Thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Barrett.
Yes, thank you. I'd like the opportunity to sort of raise a couple of points. One is that in my ward, there are a couple of villages where they have a large influx of young people in the summer evenings because, you know, there's areas where they can jump in the river and sort of party, Bures and Nayland. And the AONB are hosting 2 seasonal rangers who will be paid for by Babergh. I wondered if you'd had any contact or will liaise with them at all, because they'll be out on the patch looking at potential antisocial behaviour.
There's two answers to that. I don't mind is that where you deal with individual cases here, or do you want to do it separately?
Okay, can raise it separately with you.
Yeah, I mean, I have heard of these issues before about behaviour of young people. It's about what we do with them and diversion about the educational side. So I'm more than happy to engage with you outside the meeting on that.
Yeah, I just wondered if you'd had already knowledge of the seasonal rangers.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. And the other thing is, the report that we've got has information about the mediation that you offer. So is that between 2 sort of parties that are in a sort of headlock of conflict?
To answer your question about mediation, the way it works is that we have a structured, tiered approach to managing ASB, and mediation sits within that structure. Where we identify a situation which we don't want to penalise or criminalise anybody, but we feel that there is an acceptable need for a conversation between 2 parties, we will use mediation because they are trained professionals. Staff from Babergh and Suffolk are not trained mediators. So that's why I've got this contract with Catch-22, and they will engage about the communication side. But what it doesn't necessarily mean that both parties have to agree to it. Ideally you would, and it's only voluntary. So you could just have one person, they can engage with that where the other person doesn't want to engage. So it allows us a more efficient use of our time, because they are trained to do that. It allows officers, rather to be signposted to deal with the casework week on week, to deal with it that way. If that fails, then we go to the next tier, where there could be a sanction involved. This is about also, I think, about taking officialdom away from it, because sometimes some people have a reticence to be involved on that side. So it's about using all your knowledge and skill and think, is this an appropriate set of circumstances? Sometimes it is, and obviously sometimes it isn't. By my experience from a previous authority, the success rate was around 83%, whereby the engagement took place and the success was it never went to a different level. So for me, it does work.
Okay, so the 83% is where you don't see a recurrence of the problems coming back a few months later.
I think part of it is people don't know how to communicate between victim and perpetrator. They don't know how to have that conversation. You know, if you've got an issue with your neighbour, it's not a comfortable conversation, is it? And some people don't want to do that. Or if they do it, they don't do it in the right way, constructively. Look, this is my problem, what solutions are there to it? There's a gift to that conversation, and not everyone has it. So that's why the mediation contract has been signed out.
Okay.
Thank you very much. I had, who did I have next? Have you spoken? No, I think you were next. Councillor Ekpington, and then Councillor Maybury, and then I think Councillor Dawson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, gentlemen. You've provided a lot of different statistics in your report, and you picked out the number of incidents in particular on pages 77 and 78 across the counties of East Anglia. And as those tables stood, they didn't really do a lot for me, but I decided to recast the tables in a slightly different way. And what's very interesting is, and before I say that, I have one question. I'm assuming that the numbers per population takes account of the population growth during the periods.
Ian?
Well,
that's your domain.
It is, yeah. The numbers were per 1,000, I think, of population.
That's correct, yes. Yeah. And I'm assuming that does take account of the shifting population over the time period.
I imagine it does, but I don't know how often that shift is measured.
Okay.
So I can't answer that accurately for you.
Right, yeah. I don't think it makes a huge amount of difference to my question, because when you then look at over that 3-year period across all of the 6 counties, what I have noticed, either in absolute numbers or in numbers per 1,000 population, is the fact that Cambridgeshire, Hertfordshire and Norfolk have hardly seen a shift, really, in the number of incidents, whereas the other 3 counties, including Suffolk in particular, have seen quite a significant shift. And I just wondered if you had any explanation for why we would see as a bigger shift than anywhere else. So, I mean, the outlier, of course, is Bedfordshire.
I think my answer to that good searching question is that the data only represents what is reported. Therefore, if there's better reporting in one county to another, you're going to get different figures. There will be a contrast. That's not perhaps a scientific answer to your question, because in truth, it's difficult to answer it, because I don't have that material with me today. I don't mind taking it away to try and find out a better answer to the question, if you're happy with that.
I would be happy if you did that, because I think it may reveal some insights that may be useful in the work that you're doing. And what maybe us as councillors can do to support you.
Thank you, Councillor. One of the ideas really was to provide you with a national picture for a comparative study. That was the reason for the inclusion of those figures.
Okay. Second question. The ASB CPA 2014, we understand, wants to look at a victim-first approach, which is, I think, a good move, a very good move. So I'm a bit curious as to the statement that's made at the bottom of page 78 in relation to the Mental Health Trust. I'm just supposing that something's gone wrong in the transcribing because...
Sorry, Councillor, you said page 78.
Yes.
Mine is more, it has 13 pages.
Well, okay, so that will be, hang on a second, 1, 2, 3, page 4 of your report. Under challenges.
Yes.
Challenges, so if you're 5th paragraph down, under
Yes.
challenges, the last sentence that to me doesn't make sense because it does say that it in some cases causing the ASB to be managed on a more victim-focused basis. I thought that was what we were doing anyway. So has something been missed there?
Okay, so what I'm trying to say here, the Anti-Social Behaviour Crime Policing Act was introduced in 2014. The emphasis, the golden thread behind that was victim first. That came about from the Pilkington case. And so what they did is there's a safety net called case review on a community trigger. So my focus is for us to offer that service, victim first, we have to get our own house in order, the policies, the procedures, and there's certain things, influences we can deal with. Regarding the mental health, that's always been a challenging area, and what I mean by that is that with mental health, there's different stages to that, and it deals with their capacity as well under the Care Act, because you can have capacity, but it can be fluctuating. I can have it right at this minute, 10 minutes later I might not have it. That's a very small example of what I'm dealing with regarding mental health. From my side, the working side, what I wanted to do is promote the council that we identify those people, those voices which go unheard. The plan is to use our locality officers. The plan is that we go out there. We've been out there onto the streets. We've been out to some of the areas where there's hotspots to find out and listen what's been going on. So the golden thread is that we represent ourselves out in the community and that they actually know what we can do. So I think part of the problem is that our customers aren't aware of our services within ASB. So that's the sort of 2022 project, is to promote ourselves up there.
Mr. Chairman, just one more question. With regard to your ASB charts, so the bar graphs for Babergh and Mid-Suffolk, would it be safe to assume that the figures for AUKUS were not for a whole month?
You're correct, yes.
Okay.
Maybe should have excluded those figures because they're misleading.
Thank you. Councillor Maybury.
Thank you very much, and good to meet both of you, and thank you for coming today. My question is about noise, and believe it or not, I've picked up on here that there is a report that noise complaints in Babergh and Mid-Suffolk were 641 in 2019-20 and 815 in 2021, so an increase of 27.1%. My question to you is, how do you deal with the motorbikes that use, what shall I say, abandoned land, because I'm talking about an airfield just outside of Sudbury, and they go round and round and round and round and round and do all this illegal trail use. And I can tell you, I lay in bed at night at 10:15 at night and I can hear it, and I thought it was only me until I have lots of residents complaining to me about it. The police have attended. Do you deal with that as well, please?
Okay, thank you for that question, Councillor. So what we're talking about here is activity on private land?
Well, it's actually owned by Suffolk County Council.
Right. So let's answer the question in two different ways then. Let's assume, so got an education here, if it was private land, can we intervene? No. But the police can do if it's causing a nuisance. If it was on our land, it'd be different. We could even introduce a public space protection order.
Oh, I'm sure I can find a piece that's owned by Babergh up there, because it's a very large area.
Okay. So if it was our land or in a public space, we could introduce a public space protection order, and there's certain restrictions on there. One will be about vehicle nuisance. So if someone was found to do that, you offer them a fixed penalty notice. If they fail to pay that, that becomes an offence to which will be taken to court. That's the criminalisation side. On a much more softer way of approaching it, other than words of advice from the police, you can issue community protection notices only where it isn't on private land. Our jurisdiction ends there.
Okay, thank you. I will be able to take that back to a parish council meeting this week. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Dawson.
Yes. If I may ask, I've read this, and my question is really with regards to the tenants' management and antisocial behaviour. And you've got 7,500 tenancies, and I'm sure you had a number of complaints. I'm not going to talk about an individual case, but my understanding of this is I had last year one particular very challenging case. It was by a military guy who did this file. I've never seen anything like it. It was about his formal complaints, was very efficient about it, went through all the hoops. His neighbours, to cut a long story short, had been in prison, drugs, everything. But when it came to the mediation, because this woman had children, it was made really quite clear that at no point, really, when they jumped through all these hoops, were we ever going to move these people. And I'm interested to know, in the last year, of the mediation you've been involved with, perhaps with tenants, has that position changed? Have we ever, there are going to be problem cases, and it just seems that they have their rights. We mediate, but actually there are perhaps some difficult families. And the problem I've ended up in now is we have a whole area, it's Pykenham Way, a difficult area of Hadley, where the whole estate is now upset because this one family hasn't been removed. And at mediation, you're not able to, you can set parameters, but actually you can never really do anything. Is that correct?
There's a number of things you said there, Councillor.
Can we be quite careful, because this is a public meeting, and that is an individual case. And
well, I'm trying to be a bit not too specific here.
I think it's not far from being identifiable.
The question I'm really asking is, have we ever really evicted any social? Because my understanding is we haven't, and we have all these services available, but actually with problem families, we can't really, when it gets down to the crux, deal with it. I've been a magistrate for 13 years, so I fully understand the issues surrounding this.
Okay, so there's two answers to your question. I'll explain the makeup of where we sit, because we are not tenancy management. Tenancy management is dealt with by another team, and I deal with everything else in the private sector. However, I can help answer your question. If I got this correctly, you're talking about the eviction process.
Well, it's the mediation. You're doing the mediation with these families when they come together. And it doesn't seem to really work, is the evidence I've been presented with.
Is the question, how successful is the mediation? Because we don't want to look at, if there's one case where it wasn't successful, we don't want to talk about that one case. Is it normally successful?
Okay, well, after mediation has failed, what then?
Okay, well, it hasn't. I'm pretty sure I know the case you're referring to, and we have to be very careful what we say here. So, in a general sense, the mediation gives us the platform to look at all other options that's available to us. And sometimes, in a public eye, we cannot always tell them what we're going to be doing, but we are working behind the scenes. So it may be, for example, I'm being very general, that we're working to engineer a move for the family, as opposed to the eviction route. Because as you well know, the eviction route is something which is, we provide the evidence to the court, but it's the court that actually decides whether the order's granted or not for ourselves. So your mediation is the discussions about, if eviction is the ultimate, what can we do before then to appease both victim and support and help the perpetrator as well. there's lots of different processes. There's lots of different legal frameworks we have to consider. For example, not just the Care Act, the Human Rights Act. We have to look at proportionality and the public interest. There's a whole different world of different things out there. So your mediation is the one vehicle used to think, where can we take this to a better place other than eviction? Does that help?
No, not really, because that doesn't seem to happen, I don't think, in Babergh. I don't know of anywhere after mediation, really, where it's got any further, is my understanding.
Could I say that there may be things here which you could talk to the councillor about in private that you can't really talk about here. Would it be helpful if you were to get in touch with each other and talk
yes,
through?
No, I quite understand.
I think that would probably be better. I mean, I've had some involvement where there've been problems with particular residents, but I certainly wouldn't want to raise anything about them here because I think they're best dealt with on a one-to-one.
If I could just add to the record, so that kind of conversation needed to be held with senior leadership team, because ultimately they make that kind of decision, not myself.
Yes, okay. Yeah, thank you. Councillor Carter, and then I don't have anybody else.
Yes, some of my fund has been stolen by Councillor Epion, because I was going to ask whether or not you'd be happy for contact outside of this meeting regards how we could help you further, especially bear in mind the time constraints of this meeting today. But with my apologies for locking up. Oh, I was pleased to hear you talking about careful perpetrator as well. Some of this victim first, it does offer some concern to me, because bearing in mind that it's quite often a perpetrator is also either a victim themselves and acting out further. It could have due to either mental health or due to due to autism and development, something like that, which we have the increase of, and also the increase of complaints of audio from being locked in with COVID. Our tendency has been to react more and cope with less. It builds it, so that is it does concern me. Regards it could be a case of who shouts loudest first gets seen as the victim, whereas the other way around. I prefer a mediator first approach rather than a victim first approach, having the external person being the focus, being able to take both sides of the coin and be able to handle it better, rather than the person being seen as I approached first, therefore I'm going to get the attention first, which I've had cases where it's come down to how it's been perceived, especially of members who have had issues outside of what's been tackled in the case. So I'd appreciate contacting you in regards to that outside, possibly going through and also you may have noticed in the media there is a expected rise of antisocial behaviour. That's it was reported in a number of papers yesterday that it was statistically they're expecting it. I was pleased to see that we're having a proactive approach, but do we have a plan in place for the expected rise? Is there reason to be concerned, or is it something we're going to tackle as and when it happens?
There's two parts to that. The first part I'm going to refer to Ian, and I'll deal with the second part.
You mentioned the first part, victim first.
Apologies.
Sorry, Councillor, you mentioned victim first, and is it who shouts either the loudest or who shouts first? And I'd say definitely not. Each case, if we were to judge every case on a first account, then we might go badly wrong. Part of the investigation is to dig a little bit deeper, to find out what is below the surface, what's really going on here, before any solutions or routes are mapped out. So it's certainly not whoever shouts the loudest. We're going to investigate, we're going to look below the surface, get as many accounts as possible so that we can see the bigger picture. So I hope that helps you. In fact, we've got a case at the moment where initially a perpetrator is in fact being treated as a victim in that particular case. So I hope that puts your mind at rest in relation to that.
Could we rephrase it then in reports rather than victim first, because it does have a connotation that may be taken?
Yeah, I think the victim first comes from the Victim Codes of Practice, which were revised in April this year, and there were 10 main points to that. But yeah, I take your point, and we can make amendments.
Maybe, yeah.
Your second point, Councillor, was about resources in effect. We're expecting this kind of tsunami of complaints to arrive on our doorstep. Having already preempted that, we've looked at our capacity and capability. There's no point in having officers in place if they don't know how to actually manage ASB. So we've had internal training. We're well experienced and knowledgeable in the subject. It's about making sure that we have the right infrastructure as well. And part of that, as what I alluded to earlier, was about the software system, eSIMs. That is a good vehicle for us to use. It's about training your officers, about awareness. It's also about the first point of contact for the public. So that the website has been changed so that the referral mechanism, it's a better siphoning process, it's more efficient and quicker, it signposts the relevant area, it's environmental tenancy management, or onto my doorstep. So I'm aware of these suggestions that will arise. I tend to take it with a pinch of salt and see what happens, but we are primed and ready as best we can be.
Thank you very much.
Regards this, do we have a follow-up system regards, is it just a case dealt with and then that's it, or do we follow up these cases, because it is a concern that it may continue to perpetrate or it may crop up again? Do we just deal with it as it happens, or do we keep an eye on the individuals involved to ensure that it doesn't crop up again?
Thank you for that question. In fact, only recently I've begun to review the first cases that are dealt with as such. So although that case is filed, I'll then review with the complainant or with the victim the current status of that complaint. In other words, was your problem solved? If not, where are we in that process? So yes, we do revisit them after a reasonable amount of time, and I've already started that process.
Okay. Could I just briefly add to that? We do what's called a RAM, a risk assessment matrix. So if we go to meet a member of the public, their case is actually assessed and graded and scored, whether it's high risk, medium risk, or low risk, and we can revisit that RAM periodically. And when we finish with a case, I've designed what's called an exit strategy. We don't just close the case and have no communication with the victim. We go along and engage from that side to make sure they're happy with what the process has been and that we can close the case down.
Thank you. We have got to move on because we're in danger of losing people, which would mean we would be in quorum and we'd have to come back another day. So I'm going to go to Councillor Scarf, and then we're just going to note this information bulletin. So questions from Councillor Scarf, please.
Thank you, Chair. Well, phrasing it as a question then, could I ask that in future reports detailing the CCTV provision within both areas are perhaps a little bit more expansive on the mid-Suffolk side, because it's sort of just one line. And just for members' information, the Town Council has actually spent £40,000 this year on upgrading the CCTV network in Stowmarket, and that's the second major upgrade since the 2006 installation. This doesn't give perhaps as full a picture of the work that's been done in the area.
Thank you very much. So this information bulletin is for noting. So thank you very much indeed for coming along and answering our questions. We've just got three other very quick items, I hope. The forthcoming decisions list. Do any members have any comments on the forthcoming decisions list? as there are no questions or comments, thank you. The forthcoming decisions list is for noting. We now have two work plans, the Babergh work plan and the Mid-Suffolk work plan. They are quite similar because most of our meetings are going to be joint meetings. Do I have any comments on either of those two, please? No, thank you very much. Those work plans are for noting. That concludes the meeting, and the next meeting will be a joint overview and scrutiny meeting, and it will be held on the 18th of October at 9:30. Thank you very much indeed.